In a small-town courtroom, a quiet single dad stands with his hands cuffed, eyes calm despite the judge's mockery. The crowd joins in, convinced he's just another washed-up veteran. They've seen his type before. The judge, notorious for humiliating defendants, leans forward with a smirk and asks for his military call sign. The room chuckles at what seems like an easy victory over this silent man. Then he speaks. 2 words. The laughter stops instantly. The judge's face goes pale as he recognizes a name whispered only in classified briefings. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story of hidden strength resonates with you, consider subscribing for more tales of extraordinary people in ordinary places. Thorne Everett's hands moved with practiced efficiency as he adjusted the camera feeds displayed on his tablet. 6 angles covering the perimeter of their modest 2-story home, another 4 monitoring approach roads, all cycling through a private server that left no digital footprint. Satisfied, he set the tablet down and resumed making breakfast. "Dad, is the Wi-Fi acting up again? My study group chat keeps dropping," Wren called from the dining table, her textbooks spread out in organized chaos. Thorne glanced at his 15-year-old daughter without breaking rhythm as he flipped pancakes. "Signal interference from the storm last night. I'll reset the router after breakfast." The lie came easily after 5 years of practice. The signal drops were scheduled security protocols, not weather. But Wren didn't need to know that their internet traffic was being routed through 3 different VPNs, or that the router maintenance was actually a sweep for surveillance devices. "You said that yesterday," Wren sighed, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. A gesture so reminiscent of her mother that Thorne had to look away. Finch sent screenshots of his chem notes, but they never came through. "Eat your breakfast," Thorne said, sliding a plate of pancakes toward her. "I'll drive you to school early so you can use the library computers." Wren studied her father's face, the weathered lines around his eyes, the precise way he moved around their kitchen, the permanent vigilance that never quite left his expression even in their most ordinary moments. "You know normal dads don't have military-grade security systems, right?" "It's just surplus from the hardware store clearance," Thorne replied, the practiced explanation ready as always. "Perks of small-town pricing." "Right. Because everyone in Briarwood is installing motion sensors on their bird feeders." Wren rolled her eyes but let it drop, another familiar pattern in their carefully balanced relationship. Thorne's gaze drifted to the refrigerator, where a single photo hung. Thorne, Wren, and Iris at Cascade Lake 3 years ago, their last vacation before Iris's unexpected death. His wife's smile held secrets only he understood, the tension in her shoulders, visible only to someone trained to notice. She'd known something was coming. She'd always had better instincts than him. "Earth to Dad," Wren waved her hand. "You're doing the thing again." "What thing?" "The 1,000-yard stare at Mom's picture. It's been 3 years." Thorne blinked, focusing back on his daughter. "Just remembered I need to pick up some supplies after work." Wren's expression softened. "You know you can talk about her, right? With me?" "Eat your pancakes before they get cold," Thorne said, turning to wash the pan with methodical precision. Later that morning, after dropping Wren at school, Thorne arrived at Briarwood Maintenance and Repair, where he'd worked as a general handyman since moving to town. His boss, Lowell Merrick, was already sorting work orders. "Everett, right on time as always," Lowell said without looking up. "Military precision, I swear. You could set the atomic clock by your arrivals." Thorne accepted the day's assignments without comment. The job suited him, diverse tasks requiring technical skill, but minimal social interaction, access to various properties around town, and a boss who appreciated competence over conversation. "Got Mrs. Henderson's furnace again," Lowell continued. "3rd time this month, told her to replace the damn thing, but she insists you're the only one who knows how to speak to it properly." He raised an eyebrow. "Whatever mechanical whispering you're doing, keep it up. She leaves the best reviews." "Just listening for the right sounds," Thorne replied, gathering his tools. "One of these days, you'll have to tell me where you learned all this," Lowell said. "No handyman I know can fix everything from antique grandfather clocks to industrial HVAC systems." Thorne shouldered his bag. "Just pick things up along the way." Yeah, the mysterious past. Keep your secrets," Lowell chuckled. "Oh, Sheriff Colt called. Said her office door's sticking again, and the county maintenance guy can't come until next week. Mind stopping by?" Thorne nodded and headed out, knowing the real reason for the request. Sheriff Marietta Colt had been running informal background checks on him since he arrived in Briarwood. The broken office door was her way of getting him inside the station for observation. The maintenance calls filled his morning. By early afternoon, Thorne pulled into the parking lot of Harlan's Hardware, a family-owned store that had served Briarwood for 3 generations. Inside, he methodically selected items: electrical wire, specialized tape, and precision tools that seemed excessive for household repairs. At the register, owner Silas Harlan rang up the purchases with a low whistle. "Building something complicated, Everett?" "Just restocking," Thorne answered. Silas bagged the items, eyeing the specialized wire cutters. "Sure you're not building a bomb or something? These aren't your typical homeowner tools." Thorne didn't acknowledge the joke, paying cash as always. "My son could use your help with his science project," Silas continued, undeterred by Thorne's silence. "Something about circuitry. You seem to know your way around the technical stuff." "I'm busy this week," Thorne replied, gathering his purchases. "Try the high school physics teacher." Outside the store, he paused at the sound of raised voices. In the alley between the hardware store and the neighboring bakery, 2 older teenagers had cornered a younger boy against the brick wall. Thorne recognized the victim as Finch Abernathy, one of Wren's classmates, skinny, brilliant with computers, and perpetually targeted by bullies. "Just give us the cash, brainiac," the larger boy demanded, shoving Finch harder against the wall. "I told you I don't have any," Finch's voice cracked. "I spent it all on the new graphics card." "Then I guess we're taking the graphics card," the second teen sneered, reaching for Finch's backpack. Thorne set his purchases down and approached without haste, footsteps deliberately audible on the pavement. Both teenagers turned, sizing him up. An average-looking man in work clothes, not particularly imposing, but moving with a stillness that registered subconsciously as dangerous. "Let him go," Thorne said quietly. The larger boy smirked. "Mind your own business, old man. We're just talking with our friend." "I'm not your friend, Dawson," Finch muttered. Thorne didn't raise his voice. "Walk away now." Something in his tone made Dawson hesitate, but the second teen stepped forward aggressively. "Or what? You gonna call the cops?" In the moment that followed, several things happened with fluid precision. Thorne stepped inside the teen's swing, redirected the momentum, and suddenly both bullies found themselves off balance, separated from Finch, unsure exactly how they'd been maneuvered. "He grabbed me!" the second teen shouted, clutching his wrist theatrically. "Dawson, he just assaulted me." "You should go home, Finch," Thorne said calmly, never taking his eyes off the 2 aggressors. Finch hesitated. "But they'll just say..." "Now." Thorne's tone left no room for argument. Finch grabbed his backpack and disappeared around the corner. Dawson pulled out his phone. "My dad's a lawyer, asshole. You just made a huge mistake." The confrontation might have ended there if Deputy Archer Reed hadn't been walking out of the bakery at that precise moment, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on here?" Archer demanded, hand instinctively moving to his belt. "This guy just attacked us," Dawson said quickly. "We were just hanging out and he came out of nowhere." "He's got my wrist twisted," the second teen added. "I think it might be broken." Deputy Reed looked at Thorne, who remained perfectly still, hands visible at his sides. "That true, Mr. Everett?" "They were assaulting Finch Abernathy," Thorne stated flatly. "I intervened." "I don't see any Finch," Archer noted, looking around the empty alley. "But I do see 2 minors claiming an adult. Put hands on them." "Check the security camera." Thorne nodded toward the hardware store's exterior camera. "It will show everything." Dawson smiled smugly. "Dad says those cameras haven't worked in years. Budget cuts." Archer sighed. "Mr. Everett, I'm going to need you to come down to the station while we sort this out." "These boys are lying," Thorne said evenly. "Maybe so, but right now it's their word against yours, and Sheriff Colt has a pretty strict policy about alleged adult-minor altercations." Archer pulled out handcuffs. "We'll figure it out at the station. Turn around, please." Throughout the interaction, Thorne remained unnaturally calm, his eyes constantly scanning, assessing. He complied without resistance, allowing himself to be cuffed and led to the patrol car while the teenagers smirked behind Archer's back. At the Briarwood Sheriff's Station, deputies Nora Wesley and Bo Thompson watched through the window as Archer escorted Thorne inside. "Everett again?" Nora murmured. "That's the 3rd time this year." "What's his deal anyway?" Archer asked after securing Thorne in an interview room. He didn't seem surprised or even bothered by being arrested. Been here 5 years, Bo explained. Keeps to himself, military background we think, widower raising a teenage daughter. Seems like there's more to the story, Archer pressed. Nora shrugged. Always something off about him. Too watchful, you know? Like he's constantly expecting trouble. Or looking for it, Bo added. Always seems to be around when something's happening. Sheriff Marietta Colt entered, hanging her hat on the rack with a sigh when she spotted Thorne through the window. Everett again? What now? Archer explained the situation at the hardware store while Marietta listened, her weathered face unreadable. Those Dawson boys have been trouble since kindergarten, she noted. But without witnesses or functioning cameras, we've got a procedural mess. Should I process him for assault? Archer asked. Marietta frowned. No, but we'll have to take statements and notify Judge Harrington. Bo winced. Harrington's going to have a field day with this one. When Archer looked confused, Marietta explained. Judge Callum Harrington has a particular dislike for Everett, though they barely know each other. Something about Everett rubs him wrong. That seems unprofessional for a judge, Archer observed. Marietta's expression turned guarded. Harrington's brother was military, high-ranking colonel. He doesn't trust the quiet ones, says they're usually hiding something. Across town in the imposing brick courthouse that had served Briarwood since 1910, Judge Callum Harrington was reviewing case files when his clerk knocked timidly on the door. "What is it, Sylvia?" he asked without looking up. Sheriff Colt called. They've brought in Thorne Everett again. Alleged altercation with the Dawson boys. Harrington's pen stopped moving. He set it down with deliberate care, his expression darkening. "Schedule him for first appearance tomorrow morning, my courtroom." "But sir, Judge Oakes is handling first appearances this week." "Not for Everett," Harrington said firmly. "My courtroom, first thing." The following morning, Thorne sat perfectly still in the defendant's area, wearing the same clothes from yesterday, his face composed despite having spent the night in a cell. The courtroom was unusually full for a routine first appearance. Word traveled fast in Briarwood. Judge Callum Harrington presided from his elevated bench, imposing in his black robes. At 58, Harrington commanded the courtroom like a personal kingdom. His reputation for theatrical scolding, of defendants drawing regular spectators. When Thorne's case was called, Harrington's eyes narrowed with recognition, though they had never officially met outside the courtroom. Something personal animated the judge's scrutiny. "Mr. Everett," Harrington began, "you've been in my courtroom twice before. Always the same story. You intervening in situations that aren't your business." Thorne remained silent, his posture betraying military discipline even in county-issued clothing. "You were advised after the incident at the school basketball game to leave peacekeeping to the professionals," Harrington continued. "Yet here you are again, putting your hands on minors." "I was preventing an assault," Thorne stated simply. "So you claim. Yet no victim has come forward, and we have 2 consistent witness statements saying you attacked without provocation." Sheriff Marietta, standing at the back of the courtroom, frowned slightly but said nothing. Harrington leaned forward. "What exactly is your fixation with inserting yourself into these situations, Mr. Everett?" "I was a bystander who intervened when necessary." "Were you? Or is there something about confrontation that appeals to you?" Harrington's voice took on an edge. "Perhaps from your military days?" Thorne's expression remained neutral. "I served honorably." Something shifted in Harrington's demeanor, a subtle tightening around the eyes, a personal interest beyond judicial concern. "Did you? In what capacity exactly?" "That's not relevant to these proceedings." "I decide what's relevant in my courtroom," Harrington snapped. "You've been in Briarwood 5 years, yet you remain a mystery to most. No close friends, minimal community involvement, a security system excessive for a small-town handyman." He shuffled papers demonstratively. "It raises questions." From the gallery, Deputy Archer watched with growing discomfort. This no longer resembled a judicial proceeding, but something personal. "We'll continue this tomorrow," Harrington announced abruptly. "I want a full background check by morning. Sheriff Colt, maintain the current bond. Mr. Everett will remain in custody." As deputies led Thorne away, he noticed someone in the back row watching him with uncomfortable intensity. A man in civilian clothes with the unmistakable posture of military or law enforcement. Their eyes met briefly before Thorne was escorted out. That evening, under house arrest with an ankle monitor after Sheriff Marietta had persuaded Judge Harrington to allow him to return home, Thorne closed all the blinds and systematically checked each room of the house. Satisfied they were secure, he knelt beside his bed and pressed a hidden latch beneath the frame. A compartment slid open silently, revealing a satellite phone not connected to any commercial network. He typed a brief message, "Potential breach." The response came less than a minute later. "Surveillance activated, stand by." Wren knocked on his door just as he sealed the compartment. "Dad, can I come in?" "Of course." Thorne straightened, composing his features. She entered cautiously, eyes immediately going to the ankle monitor. "Sheriff Marietta called me. She said not to worry, but that's exactly what people say when you should definitely worry." "It's a misunderstanding," Thorne assured her. "It'll be cleared up tomorrow." Wren crossed her arms. "This is the third time, Dad. What happens if they take you away? What happens to me?" The question hit harder than any physical blow. Thorne gestured for her to sit beside him on the bed. "That won't happen. You don't know that. You can't control everything, especially not Judge Harrington. Everyone knows he has it out for you." "Why would you say that?" Thorne asked, suddenly alert. Wren gave him a look that reminded him teenagers missed nothing. "Seriously? The whole town talks about it. His brother was some big military hero, and for some reason he thinks you're faking your service record or something. Finch's mom works at the courthouse. She hears things." Thorne kept his expression neutral while his mind raced. The connection to Colonel Rhodes Harrington hadn't been in any of his intelligence briefings when they'd selected Briarwood 5 years ago. "Dad," Wren's voice softened. "Why won't you ever talk about what you did in the military? Maybe if people knew." "Some things are better left in the past," Thorne interrupted gently. "Trust me on this." Wren stood, frustration evident. "That's your answer for everything. Trust me. Don't ask questions. Everything's fine. Meanwhile, you've got enough security cameras to monitor Fort Knox and an ankle bracelet from the sheriff." After she left, Thorne moved to the window, carefully angling himself to remain out of sight while checking the street. The unmarked sedan was still there, 3 blocks down, partially obscured by oak trees. Government plates, 2 occupants. Not local law enforcement. They'd found him. Later that night, after ensuring Wren was asleep, Thorne retrieved another hidden cache from behind a false wall panel in his closet. The metal box contained multiple passports with his photo but different names, substantial cash in various currencies, and a thumb drive labeled only Nightfall. He allowed himself a rare moment of indecision. 5 years of careful cover building in Briarwood, 5 years of being Thorne Everett, unremarkable widower and handyman, 5 years of giving Wren something resembling a normal life after losing her mother, all potentially compromised because he couldn't ignore 2 teenagers threatening Finch Abernathy. Iris would have approved of his intervention, but criticized his execution. Situational awareness before action, she would have reminded him. She'd always been the better strategist. In an upscale restaurant 30 miles from Briarwood, Judge Callum Harrington sat across from his brother, Colonel Rhodes Harrington. The family resemblance was evident, though Rhodes carried himself with the rigid posture of career military, while Callum cultivated a more imposing, theatrical presence. "I need information on a Thorne Everett," Callum said after they had ordered. "Military background, moved to Briarwood 5 years ago, with a daughter after his wife died." Rhodes stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Why?" Callum described Thorne's demeanor in court, his unusual calm, the practiced way he carried himself. "Something's off about him. His background check shows honorable discharge, but there are gaps, inconsistencies." Rhodes's expression remained carefully neutral. "Lots of veterans have complicated service records. Not like this. This man has no digital footprint before arriving in Briarwood, no social media, no professional history beyond vague military service. Even his wife's death certificate is oddly redacted." Rhodes signaled the waiter for more wine, a delaying tactic Callum recognized from childhood. "Why are you fixated on this man, Cal?" "I'm not fixated. I'm concerned. He keeps involving himself in confrontations around town, always with this unnerving calm, like he's assessing threats rather than participating in normal social interaction." Rhodes considered this, then excused himself. "Let me make a call." Callum watched his brother step outside, noting the rigid set of his shoulders as he spoke urgently into his phone. When Rhodes returned several minutes later, his expression had changed completely. Drop whatever charges you have against him, Rhodes said without preamble. Now. Callum blinked, surprised by the shift. Not until I know what he's hiding. Rhodes leaned across the table, lowering his voice. Some soldiers come home with medals. Others come home with secrets that keep us safe. Leave it alone, Cal. That's not an answer. What do you know about this man? Before Rhodes could respond, his phone rang. He answered, listened intently, then looked at his brother with alarm. What have you done? There's a federal security team en route to your courtroom right now. What? Why would the feds care about a small-town handyman in a minor assault case? Rhodes grabbed his brother's arm with unusual intensity. Because he isn't a handyman, Cal. And if you've exposed him publicly, you have no idea what you've just set in motion. The drive back to Briarwood passed in tense silence, both brothers lost in thought. As they neared the town limits, Rhodes finally spoke. Tell me exactly what you said to him in court. Every word. Callum recounted the exchange, including his questioning of Thorne's military record. Did you ask about his unit, his rank, anything specific? I asked what capacity he served in. He deflected. Rhodes exhaled slowly. Thank God for that, at least. Will you please tell me what's going on? Callum demanded. Tomorrow in court, you're going to dismiss all charges without explanation, Rhodes said firmly. You're not going to ask any more questions about his service record or his past. I can't just dismiss. You can and you will, Rhodes cut him off. Because if you don't, you'll be interfering with matters far beyond your jurisdiction or clearance level. Are you saying he's some kind of federal agent? Rhodes's grim expression answered without words. I'm saying there are operations that never make the books, Cal. Men who do things for this country that require them to disappear afterward, sometimes with their families. Like witness protection? Something like that, but with higher stakes and fewer safety nets. Rhodes stared out the window at the passing darkness. Tomorrow, when you see him, for God's sake, don't ask any more questions about his identity or his service. Why not? Rhodes turned to his brother, his expression deadly serious. Because some questions, once asked in public, can't be unasked. And the people who come looking for answers aren't the kind you want in your courtroom. With the first light of dawn painting the eastern sky, have you ever wondered about the quiet people in your life? The ones who watch more than they speak, who seem to carry invisible weight on their shoulders? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story of hidden depths resonates with you, consider subscribing for more glimpses into the extraordinary lives hiding in ordinary places. The Briarwood courthouse hummed with unusual energy the next morning. Regular attendees of Judge Harrington's court sessions whispered about the increased security presence. 2 men in dark suits stationed at the rear doors, their earpieces and vigilant posture marking them as federal agents rather than local law enforcement. Sheriff Marietta Colt noticed government plates on 3 vehicles parked outside, all positioned for quick departure. Inside the judge's chambers, Callum Harrington reviewed a hastily compiled file on Thorne Everett. The official records were sparse: honorable discharge from the Army, minimal employment history before Briarwood, a marriage certificate to Iris Everett, deceased. Nothing to explain his brother's urgent warnings or the federal presence now monitoring his courtroom. Callum's clerk knocked softly. Your Honor, everyone's assembled. Has Colonel Harrington arrived? Callum asked. Yes, sir. He's in the back row? Callum nodded, adjusted his robes, and gathered the file. As he reached for his door, his phone vibrated with a text from Rhodes. Remember our agreement. Dismiss the case. No questions. The courtroom fell silent as Callum entered. He immediately noted the federal agents, now flanking the side walls as well as the back. His brother sat rigid in the last row, expression guarded. Sheriff Marietta stood near the jury box, her deputies positioned strategically throughout the room. The gallery was filled beyond capacity, word having spread that something unusual was happening in Judge Harrington's normally predictable courtroom. Bring in the defendant, Callum ordered, his voice betraying none of his inner turmoil. When Thorne entered, the atmosphere shifted perceptibly. He moved with the same composed efficiency as before, but something had changed since yesterday. A subtle alertness in his posture suggested he had registered every federal agent, every exit point, every potential threat or ally in the room. Mr. Everett, Callum began, fighting the urge to look toward his brother for guidance. Yesterday we discussed your tendency to involve yourself in situations around Briarwood. Thorne remained silent, his expression neutral but attentive. Callum continued, intentionally adjusting his usual aggressive approach. The court has reviewed the circumstances of your recent altercation with the Dawson youths. From the gallery came a soft snort. Finch Abernathy sat with his mother, a courthouse administrator, both watching with evident concern. The Dawson brothers and their father were conspicuously absent. Before we proceed, Callum said, I'd like to clarify some details about your background that may be relevant to these proceedings. One of the suited men shifted position slightly. In the back row, Rhodes tensed. You've stated you served in the military, Callum continued, measuring each word carefully. Would you care to elaborate on your service record? Sheriff Marietta frowned at the direction of questioning. Procedurally, this was irregular for a simple assault case. Thorne's response was measured. I served honorably and received an honorable discharge, Your Honor. Yet your records show significant gaps, Callum pressed, aware he was disregarding his brother's warnings, but unable to contain his judicial instinct to uncover truth. Your file indicates potential specialized service, but details are remarkably sparse. Military records can be complicated, Thorne replied evenly. Indeed, Callum leaned forward, especially when portions have been deliberately redacted or classified. The word classified hung in the air. One of the suited men touched his earpiece, listening intently. If you're so proud of your service, Callum continued, frustration building at Thorne's minimal responses. Tell us your unit, your rank, your deployments. Classified, Thorne stated simply. The gallery murmured. Classification was not unusual for military personnel, but something in Thorne's delivery suggested a higher level of secrecy than typical veterans might claim. Across town, unaware of the courtroom drama, Wren Everett had skipped school. The house felt eerily empty without her father's quiet presence. She paced the living room, replaying their conversation from the night before, troubled by the resignation she'd heard in his voice when discussing the possibility of being taken away. After checking that no one was watching the house, a habit unconsciously adopted from her father, Wren made a decision. If Dad wouldn't explain his past, perhaps the house itself held answers. She started in his bedroom, methodically searching areas she'd never explored out of respect for his privacy. The closet revealed nothing unusual until she noticed a slight difference in the wall paneling behind his hanging clothes. Pressing carefully, she found a hidden compartment containing a sealed envelope. Inside was a photograph she'd never seen, her mother in military uniform with all identifying insignias removed. Iris looked younger, but carried the same watchful intensity Wren recognized from her father. On the back, written in her mother's handwriting that Wren had almost forgotten, Nightfall Team Redacted, the best of us. Before she could process this discovery, movement outside caught her eye. A woman in a crisp suit stood across the street, watching the house with professional interest. When their eyes met through the window, the woman didn't look away or pretend to be doing something else. Instead, she nodded slightly in acknowledgement before speaking into what appeared to be a communication device. Back in the courtroom, Judge Harrington's frustration with Thorne's minimal responses had escalated visibly. He rose from his bench and circled toward Thorne with theatrical deliberation, a tactic that usually intimidated defendants into more forthcoming testimony. "This is my courtroom, Mr. Everett," Harrington declared. "Nothing is classified here. I determine what information is relevant and necessary for these proceedings." The gallery watched in tense silence. Even regular spectators of Harrington's theatrical style sensed this had moved beyond his usual performance into something more personal. "Men like you hide behind classified because the truth is less impressive," Harrington continued, circling closer. "What were you really? A desk jockey? A supply sergeant? Someone who served safely behind the lines while real operators did the dangerous work?" Thorne remained silent, eyes fixed forward. One of the suited men shifted position again, hand moving subtly toward his jacket. Sheriff Marietta whispered to Deputy Archer, "This isn't right. Harrington's turned this into something personal." Archer nodded, his discomfort evident. "Is that even legal? Badgering someone about their military service in an assault case?" Harrington, building to his crescendo, approached the defense table. "You keep inserting yourself into situations around town, playing the quiet protector. Is that because you couldn't cut it when it actually mattered, when real lives were on the line?" Throughout the courtroom, those with military experience, including deputies Bo and Nora, exchanged uncomfortable glances. This had crossed a line of professional conduct. Harrington, sensing the shift in atmosphere but mistaking it for support, pressed harder. "You moved to Briarwood after your wife died. Or did she leave? Is that what you're hiding behind this wall of silence?" Something dangerous flickered in Thorne's eyes, the first genuine emotion he'd displayed. It vanished almost instantly, but those watching closely had glimpsed something beyond his controlled exterior. Colonel Rhodes half rose from his seat, clearly considering intervention. The suited men exchanged glances, one touching his earpiece again. Sheriff Marietta straightened, preparing to object to the proceedings. Harrington, oblivious to the shifting dynamics, leaned in for his final provocation. "Fine. If you're so special, tell us your call sign. Every real operator has one." The courtroom fell silent. Everyone expected Thorne's continued silence, his pattern established through every previous interaction. One of the suited men urgently scribbled a note that was passed to Sheriff Marietta. She read it quickly, eyes widening, then began moving toward the judge. But it was too late. Thorne raised his head slowly, eyes meeting Harrington's directly for the first time. His voice was quiet, but reached every corner of the silent room. "Shadow Hawk." The effect was immediate and electric. One of the suited men stood abruptly. Deputy Archer, though not understanding the significance, registered the wave of tension that swept through the federal agents. But most telling was Judge Harrington's reaction. His face drained of color as recognition, then shock, then fear crossed his features in rapid succession. Harrington stumbled back toward his bench, gripping it for support. The court officer leaned in, whispering urgently in his ear. Harrington stared at Thorne as though seeing him for the first time, or perhaps seeing through the carefully constructed identity to something hidden beneath. "This case is dismissed," Harrington announced abruptly, voice unsteady. "All charges dropped. Court adjourned." He banged his gavel with unusual force and exited quickly through his chamber door. The courtroom erupted in confused murmurs. The suited men converged on Thorne, not restraining him, but flanking him protectively. Sheriff Marietta intercepted Deputy Archer's questions with a firm shake of her head. "Not here." As Thorne was escorted toward the exit, Colonel Rhodes Harrington entered through the main doors, their eyes locking across the crowded space. They exchanged an almost imperceptible nod, acknowledgement between warriors who recognized each other without introduction. No words necessary. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd of reporters and curious townspeople had gathered, word having spread that something unusual was happening with the Everett case. "Mr. Everett, what just happened in there?" a local news reporter called out as Thorne emerged flanked by the suited men. "What does Shadow Hawk mean?" another shouted. Thorne said nothing, walking steadily through the chaos. A black SUV with government plates waited at the curb, its engine running. As he approached, the rear door opened from within. Before entering, Thorne scanned the surroundings one final time, not with fear, but with practiced assessment, the instinct of someone accustomed to identifying threats in any environment. Inside the judge's chambers, Callum Harrington frantically searched classified databases on his secure computer terminal. As an appointed federal judge, he had access to certain restricted information, though clearly not enough to have recognized the significance of Shadow Hawk before his public questioning. Images flashed across his screen, redacted mission reports with entire pages blacked out except for location codes, grainy surveillance photos from the conflict zones where official U.S. presence had been denied, newspaper headlines about miraculous rescues of hostages with no explanation of how they occurred, and finally a heavily redacted file with a single uncensored line: Operation Nightfall, primary operator, Shadow Hawk. Beside it, a mission location matching where Rhodes' unit had been rescued after being declared lost with all hands in a classified operation 7 years ago. Callum collapsed into his chair as the door opened and Rhodes entered, still in his civilian clothes but carrying himself with full military bearing. "You knew," Callum whispered, gesturing to the screen. Rhodes nodded grimly. "Not exactly. I never saw his face during the extraction. The men who came for us wore advanced combat gear, faces covered, voices disguised, but I heard what happened afterward, what he did to get us out, what he sacrificed. Rhodes placed a hand on his brother's shoulder, an unusual gesture between the always competitive siblings. You just publicly outed the most decorated ghost in special operations history, Cal. A man who saved 37 lives, including mine. A man whose name doesn't exist in any public record. Callum looked up, ashen. What have I done? You've potentially compromised national security, Rhodes answered bluntly. But more immediately, you've exposed him and his daughter to people who have been hunting Shadowhawk for years. His daughter, Callum repeated, the implications sinking in. The teenager at the high school. His wife was his handler, Rhodes continued. Part of the same classified program. She was killed during their extraction from their last mission. Took a bullet meant for him, while ensuring civilians got out safely. And now I've blown his cover, Callum said, the full weight of his actions descending. Because I couldn't let go of my suspicions about a small-town handyman. Rhodes moved toward the door. We need to go, now. If they've found him, they'll move quickly to secure all connections. The daughter will be their first priority. Across town, Thorne arrived home to find Wren with her bags packed, standing beside a woman in a crisp suit, the same woman Wren had seen watching the house earlier. Commander Ellery Vanguard, stern-faced and efficient, had been Thorne's former handler after Iris's death. Protocol Avalanche has been initiated, Vanguard informed him without preamble. Your cover is compromised. Wren looked between them, confused and frightened. Dad, what's happening? Who is this? Thorne set down his keys with deliberate calm, his mind racing through contingencies. How did they find us? They didn't, Vanguard replied. We've been monitoring increased chatter for months. When Judge Harrington started digging into your background, flags were raised. We've had a team in place as precaution. But you didn't stop him from exposing me in open court, Thorne noted, his voice carrying no accusation, merely tactical assessment. The situation evolved too quickly, Vanguard admitted. By the time we identified the judge's brother's connection to Operation Nightfall, he had already scheduled your appearance. Wren stepped forward, clutching the envelope she'd found. Dad, what is going on? Who are you really? Thorne looked at his daughter, 15 years old, but carrying herself with the same innate poise that had marked her mother. He'd hoped to delay this conversation until she was older, perhaps until she never needed to know at all. That option was gone now. He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. There are things I couldn't tell you, about my work, about why we moved here. Were you some kind of soldier? Wren asked. More than just regular military? I was part of a specialized unit, Thorne confirmed. We handled operations that couldn't be officially acknowledged. Extractions, rescues, interventions in situations deemed impossible. And Mom? Wren's voice trembled slightly. Your mother was one of us, Thorne said gently. The best of us, actually. Strategist, linguist, field commander. That's how we met. Understanding dawned in Wren's eyes. She wasn't just a translator, was she? All those languages she spoke with me when I was little. She was preparing you, Thorne said. Just in case. Everything I've done, everything was to keep you safe after she died. Mom knew, didn't she? Wren asked. That something was coming for you both? Thorne nodded, something inside him easing at finally sharing this truth. She always had better instincts than me. Commander Vanguard's phone rang, interrupting the moment. Her expression shifted as she listened. Change of plans, she announced, ending the call. They're already here. Who's here? Wren asked. People who've been looking for your father. For a very long time, Vanguard explained, moving to the window and checking the street with professional assessment. People who lost power, money, and operatives because of what he and your mother did. The hardware store purchases, Thorne realized. They flagged the specialized components. Vanguard nodded. Facial recognition caught you at the counter. We tracked 3 separate mercenary teams crossing into the county within the last hour. What do we do? Wren asked, panic finally edging into her voice. Thorne straightened, decision made. We don't run, not this time. Vanguard looked at him sharply. That's not protocol. Extraction team is 20 minutes out. They'll be watching all exit routes, Thorne countered. Urban extraction with unknown hostile positions puts Wren at maximum risk. And staying here doesn't? Vanguard challenged. Here, we control the environment, Thorne said, moving to the false wall panel Wren had discovered earlier. He pressed a different section, revealing not the small compartment she'd found, but a larger cache built into the house's structure. Inside was an arsenal that transformed the quiet handyman before Ren's eyes. Tactical gear, communications equipment, weapons she couldn't identify. Watching her father access the hidden resources with practiced efficiency was like seeing a foreign language she somehow understood instinctively. "You've been preparing for this," Ren realized. "All the security cameras, the router maintenance, the drills you called games." "Since the day we arrived," Thorne confirmed, checking equipment with the same methodical precision he applied to fixing furnaces and clearing gutters. "Your mother's first rule, always have an exit strategy." "Or a defense strategy," Vanguard added, already coordinating with her team via encrypted communication. "I'll call Sheriff Marietta," Thorne decided. "She needs to establish a perimeter, keep civilians clear." "Local law enforcement will only complicate the situation," Vanguard objected. "Marietta's ex-military," Thorne countered. "Marines, 2 tours. She suspected something about me from the beginning. She'll understand the stakes." As darkness fell over Briarwood, vehicles began converging on the outskirts of town. Not government protectors, but mercenaries seeking the man known as Shadowhawk. Paid hunters representing interests damaged by operations that officially never happened. Sheriff Marietta Colt, having received Thorne's call, positioned her deputies strategically around the Everett neighborhood. "No civilian traffic past this point," she instructed Deputy Archer. "This is now a federal security operation." "What exactly is happening?" Archer asked, watching as more unmarked vehicles assembled at the command post Marietta had established 3 blocks from the Everett home. "The less you know right now, the better," Marietta replied, checking her sidearm with the practiced motion of someone reverting to military training. "But I'll tell you this, for 5 years, we've had someone remarkable living among us, and none of us knew it." "Everett?" Archer looked skeptical. "The quiet handyman?" "Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who work hardest to appear ordinary," Marietta said. "It's the loud ones you rarely need to worry about." A black SUV approached their checkpoint, slowing as it reached the barricades. Judge Callum Harrington emerged from the passenger seat, his brother Colonel Rhodes from the driver's side. "I came to help," Callum told Marietta. "This is my fault." Rhodes appeared beside him in full military uniform, the decorations and insignia indicating his high rank. "We both did." Marietta assessed them briefly. "Colonel Harrington, I assume you have appropriate clearance for this situation?" "Higher than anyone else currently in Briarwood," Rhodes confirmed, "though perhaps not as directly relevant as yours, Sheriff. 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, if I recall correctly." Marietta's expression registered surprise that he knew her service record. "That was a lifetime ago, Colonel." "Not tonight, it isn't," Rhodes replied grimly. "Tonight, we're all who we once were." Inside the Everett home, Thorne had transformed the modest house into a defensible position. Security feeds displayed on multiple screens showed the perimeter, approaching vehicles, and heat signatures moving through nearby properties. "They're establishing a containment formation," Thorne observed, recognizing the tactical pattern. "Professional, military-trained. Former Special Forces operators gone private," Vanguard confirmed. "Contracted through cutouts to maintain deniability." Ren watched this exchange with growing comprehension. The tactical language, the calm assessment of deadly threats. It should have felt foreign, yet somehow it resonated with instincts she hadn't known she possessed. "The protocols you taught me," she said suddenly. "The exit routes from school, memorizing landmarks rather than street names, the check-in signals. That wasn't paranoia, was it?" "It was preparation," Thorne answered. "Your mother insisted. She said you had her aptitude for strategy." A notification pinged on one of the security screens. Thorne touched the display, bringing up thermal imaging of 3 figures approaching from the west side of the property. "First team making their move," he noted, reaching for equipment. Ren stared at her father, seeing him clearly for the first time, not just the quiet, protective parent, but the operator beneath. "What do we do?" Thorne handed her a secure communication device. "You remember the safe room we accidentally discovered during that plumbing leak last year?" Ren nodded, understanding dawning. "The one behind the basement storage shelves that you said was probably a Prohibition-era hiding spot. It's reinforced with ballistic material and has independent communications and air supply," Thorne explained. "Commander Vanguard will secure you there." While you do what? Wren challenged, her mother's strategic mind evidently at work. Face them alone? That's not a defensible plan with the current force distribution. Thorne and Vanguard exchanged glances, both recognizing Iris in her daughter's assessment. I won't be alone, Thorne assured her, checking the security feeds again. Sheriff Marietta has established a perimeter. Federal response teams are inbound, and it appears we have some unexpected allies. The feed showed Judge Harrington and his brother, Colonel Rhodes, conferring with Sheriff Marietta at the command post. The judge looked shaken but determined, a man confronting the consequences of his actions. The judge? Wren looked incredulous. The same one who just exposed you in court? People are complicated, Thorne said simply. Sometimes the ones who judge most harshly are carrying their own burdens. A flash of movement on the northern perimeter, camera drew their attention. 3 armed figures had breached the neighbor's property, using the carefully maintained hedges as cover. Commander Vanguard touched her earpiece, receiving updates. Bravo team is engaging the western approach. We need to move now. Thorne knelt before his daughter one final time. Wren, I need you to go with Commander Vanguard. But Dad, this isn't a negotiation, he said firmly, though his eyes softened. Your safety is the mission, the only mission that matters. In that moment, Wren saw what had always been there beneath her father's quiet exterior, the absolute focus and determination that had earned him the whispered call sign that could silence a courtroom. Shadowhawk, she said quietly, testing the name. That's really you, isn't it? It was, Thorne corrected gently. For a long time. But Thorne Everett, your father, that's who I chose to become. Remember that. As Vanguard led Wren toward the concealed safe room, the first sounds of engagement reached them from outside, the tactical teams making contact with the approaching mercenaries. Through the window, Thorne could see Sheriff Marietta's deputies coordinating with federal agents who had finally arrived. Judge Harrington was visible at the command post, providing what appeared to be intelligence to the operational leaders. Thorne checked his equipment one final time, muscle memory from years of similar preparations returning instantly. The quiet handyman who fixed furnaces and built bookshelves disappeared, replaced by the operator he had been. The ghost that some of the most dangerous people in the world had been hunting for 5 years. As he moved toward the door to join the defensive operation, his satellite phone chimed with an incoming message. Shadowhawk, this is Switchback. Positions compromised. Hostile forces have your daughter's photo. Second team targeting school and friends. They know about Finch Abernathy. Have you ever considered how the quietest people in your town might be carrying the most remarkable stories? The neighbor who always keeps to themselves, the parent who seems overly cautious, the veteran who never discusses their service. Sometimes silence isn't emptiness, but a vessel holding truths too complex for casual conversation. If you've encountered someone whose depth surprised you when finally revealed, share your experience in the comments. And if stories of hidden strength beneath ordinary surfaces resonate with you, subscribe for more narratives that explore the extraordinary concealed within the everyday. Thorne had spent 5 years ensuring that Shadowhawk remained buried, existing only in classified files and whispered legends. Now, as he moved through the darkened house with the fluid efficiency of a predator, that buried identity resurged with terrifying completeness. The message on his phone changed everything. They weren't just targeting him, but Wren's connections, specifically Finch Abernathy. Vanguard, Thorne called, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of command. Change of plans. Commander Ellery Vanguard appeared from the basement stairway, her expression questioning. Safe room is secure. They know about Finch, Thorne stated, already checking his tactical gear. Second team targeting the school and known associates. Vanguard processed this with military efficiency. Classic leverage play. How did they identify the connection so quickly? Social media analysis, most likely. Wren may have kept a low profile, but teenagers document everything. Thorne checked the security feeds, noting the positioning of Sheriff Marietta's deputies and the federal agents now establishing a defensive perimeter. We need to split our resources. Agreed. I'll coordinate with local assets to secure potential civilian targets. You maintain position here with your daughter. No. Thorne's decision was already made. I'm going for Finch. You stay with Wren. Vanguard's objection was immediate. That's not protocol. You're the primary target. Your exposure creates maximum risk. which is why they'll expect me to remain here, protected by federal assets. Thorne was already moving to a concealed exit at the rear of the house, a route invisible to the surveillance now surrounding the property. They want me to stay defensive. We're changing the equation. You're going offensive? Vanguard realized. Solo infiltration against an unknown force deployment. Just like Damascus, Thorne replied, checking his communications equipment. Tell Sheriff Marietta I need a distraction at the main perimeter. 2 minutes. Before Vanguard could object further, Thorne disappeared through the hidden passage, one of 3 emergency exits he'd built into the house when they'd first arrived in Briarwood. Some habits couldn't be unlearned, even after 5 years of practiced normalcy. Outside, the night had transformed the quiet neighborhood into a tactical battlefield. Sheriff Marietta coordinated her deputies with the federal agents, establishing a defensive ring around the Everett property. Judge Harrington and his brother Colonel Rhodes remained at the command post, the judge looking increasingly uncomfortable as the military reality of the situation unfolded around him. How many hostiles are we dealing with? Marietta asked the federal team leader, a stone-faced woman who had identified herself only as Agent Chen. At least 3 teams of 4 operators, Chen replied, scanning thermal imagery on a tablet. Former special forces, heavily armed, using advanced coordination protocols. Mercenaries, Colonel Rhodes clarified, contracted through cutouts to maintain deniability if captured. Marietta absorbed this. And they're here for Everett, the handyman who fixes Mrs. Henderson's furnace? They're here for Shadow Hawk, Rhodes corrected, a man who cost some very dangerous people a great deal of money and influence. Callum Harrington's face reflected mounting guilt. Because I couldn't leave well enough alone. You had no way of knowing, Rhodes offered, though his tone carried little conviction. I was trying to humiliate him in my courtroom, Callum admitted, to prove he was a fraud. Instead, I exposed a war hero to his enemies. Recriminations later, Marietta cut in sharply. Right now, we focus on the tactical situation. Her radio crackled with Commander Vanguard's voice. Sheriff, we need a distraction at the main perimeter. 2 minutes. Marietta didn't question the request, immediately signaling Deputy Archer to redirect resources toward the street-facing barrier. Something in the efficiency of the communication told her that operational control had shifted. The quiet handyman was now running the show. Inside the safe room, Wren paced the confined space, studying the security feeds with growing comprehension. The tactical deployment outside, the coordinated movement of forces. It was like watching a chess match played at lethal stakes. My dad's gone offensive, hasn't he? She asked suddenly. Commander Vanguard looked up from her communications device. What makes you say that? The distraction at the main perimeter, the thermal signature moving through the Crawford property to the east. That's him, isn't it? Wren pointed to a barely perceptible heat trace moving with remarkable stealth between sensor blind spots. He's using the neighborhood drainage tunnels we mapped last summer during the flood prevention project. Vanguard studied the teenager with newfound respect. You have your mother's tactical eye. And her impatience with being sidelined, Wren countered. Why is he moving away from our position? What changed? They've identified Finch Abernathy as a potential leverage point, Vanguard explained, seeing no purpose in shielding the girl from operational reality. Your father is moving to secure him before they can. Wren's expression hardened with sudden clarity. The hardware store incident wasn't random. They used Finch as bait, knowing Dad would intervene. They've been mapping his behavior patterns, looking for predictable responses. Very good, Vanguard nodded. Operational assessment is correct. They studied his protective instincts, especially toward young people. That's why he always taught me to vary my routes to school, to never establish recognizable patterns, Wren realized. He knew someone might be watching. Your father survived in environments where being predictable meant being dead, Vanguard confirmed. Those instincts don't disappear, even in a place like Briarwood. Meanwhile, Thorne moved through the drainage system with silent efficiency, emerging 3 blocks from his house in the opposite direction from the main police perimeter. The night provided natural concealment as he made his way toward the Abernathy residence, staying off main streets and using the routes he had mentally mapped during 5 years of daily maintenance work throughout Briarwood. His satellite phone vibrated with an incoming message from Vanguard. Second team confirmed, 4 operators approaching Abernathy residence from north, ETA 3 minutes. Thorne increased his pace. 5 years as a handyman hadn't diminished his physical conditioning, the daily workouts disguised as household chores, the running routes carefully designed to appear casual while maintaining tactical readiness. Shadowhawk had never truly disappeared. He'd merely been waiting beneath the surface of Thorne Everett's carefully constructed normalcy. As he approached the Abernathy house, Thorne noted the darkened windows and absence of vehicles. The family wasn't home, likely still at the courthouse where Finch's mother worked as an administrator. His thermal scanner confirmed no heat signatures inside, but detected movement at the property's rear boundary. 4 figures using the neighbor's garden shed as cover while they prepared to breach. Thorne activated his secure communication link. "Vanguard, I have eyes on second team preparing to breach Abernathy residence. Family not present. Requesting current location of Finch Abernathy and mother." "Courthouse security confirms they are with Judge Harrington's clerk," Vanguard responded. "Building secured by federal assets." "Copy that. We'll engage second team to prevent establishment of additional forward positions." The calm in his voice belied the tactical disadvantage. 1 operator against 4, with unknown weapons configurations and uncertain objectives beyond his capture or elimination. But Thorne had faced worse odds in Damascus, in Caracas, in operations that existed only in redacted files. The mercenaries moved with professional discipline, establishing breach positions around the Abernathy house. Their communications would be encrypted, their tactics coordinated. But they had one critical disadvantage. They were hunting Shadowhawk without realizing he was already hunting them. The first operator fell silently, a precise strike rendering him unconscious before he could alert his team. The second managed to reach for his weapon before Thorne neutralized him with similar efficiency. The remaining 2 registered the threat simultaneously, bringing weapons to bear as Thorne disappeared into the shadows between properties. "Contact East Perimeter," one of them reported into his communication device. "Target engaged, moving north between residential structures." They pursued with professional caution, unaware they were being drawn away from the house and into a pre-selected engagement zone, the construction site of Briarwood's new community center, where Thorne had spent the past month installing electrical systems and memorizing every support beam, stairwell, and shadowed corner. At the command post, Sheriff Marietta received reports of engagement at the Abernathy property. "How the hell did hostiles get past our perimeter?" she demanded. "They didn't," Colonel Rhodes realized, studying the tactical display. "Everett is engaging a second team that was already in position. He's leading them away from civilian structures." "He left the protective perimeter?" Agent Chen's disbelief was evident. "With 3 mercenary teams specifically targeting him?" "You're thinking defense," Rhodes explained. Shadowhawk was never defensive. His operational signature was always about seizing initiative, forcing opponents to react rather than act. Judge Harrington watched the unfolding situation with growing comprehension. The quiet, composed man from his courtroom wasn't just a skilled operator. He was a tactical genius manipulating the battlefield even while outnumbered and outgunned. "We need to redirect assets to support his position," Marietta decided, already issuing orders to her deputies. "No need," Rhodes countered, pointing to thermal signatures converging on the construction site. "He's already drawn them into a confined space with limited exit points. Classic Shadowhawk." At the construction site, Thorne moved through darkness with lethal precision. The 2 remaining mercenaries had separated to cover more ground, a fundamental tactical error when facing a superior opponent in familiar territory. He neutralized the 3rd operator as the man ascended an incomplete stairwell, leaving only the team leader actively hunting. "Wilson, report," the leader's voice carried through the darkness. "Mackenzie, status check." The silence that answered was more effective than any verbal threat. The mercenary leader switched to thermal imaging, scanning methodically as he moved through the skeletal structure. But Thorne had anticipated this, using construction materials to mask his heat signature as he positioned himself. "Whoever's running your operation has bad intelligence," Thorne spoke suddenly, his voice echoing through the unfinished space, impossible to pinpoint. "Shadowhawk died 5 years ago in Ankara. You're hunting a ghost." The mercenary fired toward the sound, rounds impacting harmlessly, into concrete supports. "Yet here you are, engaging rather than escaping. Your file mentioned the hero complex. Couldn't resist saving the boy again?" "The boy was never in danger," Thorne replied from a different position. You telegraphed your intentions at the hardware store. Amateur work. Says the man who spent 5 years hiding in a backwater town fixing toilets, the mercenary countered, trying to draw Thorne into revealing his position. How's the daughter, by the way? Wren, isn't it? Your wife had prettier eyes, from what I've seen in the files. The mention of Iris and Wren was calculated to provoke an emotional response, to make Thorne careless. Instead, it achieved the opposite, a cold, crystalline focus that had once made Shadowhawk the most effective extraction specialist in operations that officially never existed. Your employer must be desperate, Thorne observed, voice now directly behind the mercenary, sending second-rate contractors after spending 5 years searching. The mercenary spun, firing automatically, but Thorne had already moved. The game of psychological warfare continued for precious minutes as federal assets converged on the construction site. By the time Sheriff Marietta's deputies secured the perimeter, all 4 mercenaries were incapacitated and secured, with Thorne nowhere to be found. "Where the hell did he go?" Agent Chen demanded, surveying the scene with professional frustration. Colonel Rhodes smiled slightly. To finish the mission, back at the command post, Judge Harrington received word that the Abernathy family had been safely evacuated from the courthouse to a secure location. As he processed this information, a shadow separated from the darkness behind the mobile command center. "Your brother's unit in Syria," Thorne said quietly, causing Harrington to startle violently. 37 men declared lost with all hands after intelligence failure led them into an ambush. Harrington recovered his composure with effort. "Rhodes told me it was you who extracted them, against direct orders to abandon the operation. The mission was compromised before it began," Thorne continued as if Harrington hadn't spoken. "Someone with high-level access had sold the operational details to local warlords with terrorist connections." Realization dawned in Harrington's eyes. That's who's after you now, not just revenge for a failed operation, but silencing a witness who could identify the original betrayal. "My wife identified the leak before she was killed," Thorne confirmed. "The evidence was secured in multiple locations, accessible only if something happened to both of us. And when I exposed your identity in court, you accelerated a timetable that was already in motion," Thorne finished. "They've been narrowing the search for months. The hardware store incident was a test of my behavioral patterns, confirming suspicions before committing resources." Harrington's judicial demeanor crumbled under the weight of comprehension. "I've endangered your daughter, and for what? Because I couldn't believe someone like you would choose a quiet life in Briarwood?" "People rarely see what they're not looking for," Thorne replied without accusation. "Your brother understood. Sometimes the loudest patriots aren't the ones who serve best." Before Harrington could respond, Colonel Rhodes approached, tension evident in his posture. "Third team is moving on your house. They've breached the outer perimeter." Thorne was already moving. "Vanguard and Wren? Still secure in the safe room, but federal assets are engaged on multiple fronts. They're creating diversions, testing response patterns. They're looking for vulnerabilities in the defensive formation," Thorne analyzed. "Standard infiltration protocol when facing superior numbers." The 3 men moved quickly toward vehicles, Thorne already communicating with Commander Vanguard to coordinate response. As they approached the Everett neighborhood, the tactical situation became immediately apparent. Federal agents and sheriff's deputies engaged with mercenary teams across multiple positions. The disciplined defense strained by coordinated attacks from multiple vectors. Inside the safe room, Wren monitored the security feeds with growing concern. They're using standard infiltration tactics, testing the perimeter for response times and coverage gaps. Commander Vanguard looked at her sharply. "How do you recognize standard infiltration tactics?" "Dad's training exercises," Wren explained. "The games we played analyzing historical military campaigns. The chess variants focusing on defensive positioning against superior numbers. He was preparing you," Vanguard realized. "Just in case." "Mom started it," Wren said quietly. "Before she died. She taught me to think 3 moves ahead, to see patterns where others see only chaos." Before Vanguard could respond, the security system registered a perimeter breach, sophisticated equipment counteracting Thorne's home defenses. The safe room remained secure, but the house itself had been compromised. "They're inside," Wren stated calmly, studying the thermal signatures moving through the main floor. 3 operators, tactical formation, systematically clearing rooms. Vanguard checked her weapons. "Stay here. Security protocols will maintain safe room integrity. Wait. Wren grabbed her arm. Look at their movement pattern. They're not searching randomly. They know exactly where to look. Vanguard analyzed the feeds with sudden comprehension. They have the house schematics, including the safe room location, which means they have access to the original architectural modifications filed with the county building department, Wren concluded. 5 years ago, when we first moved here. They've been planning this longer than we realized, Vanguard acknowledged. We need to move, now. Outside, Thorne arrived at the neighborhood perimeter alongside Colonel Rhodes and Judge Harrington. Sheriff Marietta briefed them on the tactical situation. They've breached your house, she reported grimly. Federal agents are engaging, but these aren't typical mercenaries. Their coordination and equipment suggest specialized military background. Thorne nodded, already analyzing approach vectors. They'll expect me to attempt entry through one of the emergency exits. We need to create a genuine emergency to mask my approach. What kind of emergency? Harrington asked. The kind that temporarily blinds surveillance and thermal imaging, Rhodes understood immediately, like an electrical substation failure. Southeast grid node supplies this entire neighborhood, Thorne confirmed. Maintenance access is through the utility easement behind Crawford's property. Marietta activated her radio. Deputy Archer, I need you at the Southeast grid substation. Authorization code Bravo 7, full blackout protocol. As they formulated the approach, Thorne received an encrypted message from Vanguard. Safe room compromised. Relocating asset via emergency tunnel. Rendezvous at Contingency Point Echo. The contingency points had been established when they first arrived in Briarwood, 5 locations strategically positioned throughout town, each offering multiple evacuation routes and defensive advantages. Point Echo was the old Cascade Lake boathouse, where the family photo on Thorne's refrigerator had been taken, their last outing before Iris's death. They're moving Wren, Thorne informed the others. Safe room security has been breached. How is that possible? Rhodes demanded. Those systems are cutting edge. Because they've been planning this for 5 years, Thorne replied. Since the day we arrived in Briarwood, they knew where to look, what to target. This was never about capturing me. It was about forcing me into the open to reach Wren. Realization dawned in Marietta's eyes. You're the bait. They're using you to flush out your daughter. Because she's the one who can access the evidence that would expose their operation, Thorne confirmed. Iris made sure of that before she died. As darkness gave way to pre-dawn gray, the power grid failed across eastern Briarwood. Emergency systems activated at critical infrastructure points, but the residential neighborhoods plunged into darkness. Thermal imaging and electronic surveillance temporarily neutralized. In this orchestrated chaos, Thorne moved with lethal purpose toward his home, no longer the careful handyman, but the operator who had earned the whispered name that silenced courtrooms. Judge Harrington, witnessing this transformation, finally understood the magnitude of his error in exposing this man's identity. Inside the Everett home, the mercenary team leader received word of the power failure with professional suspicion. Grid sabotage, he's making his move. Tunnel system shows no movement, his second reported. Safe room remains sealed. Check the northeast. Bedroom closet, the leader ordered. Intelligence indicates a concealed access point behind the false wall panel. As the team moved to investigate, the house's security system, operating on independent power, registered a new heat signature entering through the kitchen garden access. Not Thorne, but Judge Callum Harrington, moving with uncharacteristic stealth. The mercenaries adjusted positions, tracking the judge's movement through the house. Their orders specified Thorne and his daughter as primary targets, but Judge Harrington represented a valuable secondary objective, the man who had publicly exposed Shadowhawk's identity. In the northeast bedroom, the mercenary located the false panel Wren had discovered earlier, revealing the hidden compartment with multiple passports and the thumb drive labeled Nightfall. As he reached for it, the house's internal communication system activated unexpectedly. That drive is DNA locked to my wife. Thorne's voice echoed through the house's speaker system. Anyone else attempting to access it triggers a specialized encryption protocol that destroys the data. The mercenary team instantly shifted to defensive positions, scanning for Thorne's location. You've spent 5 years tracking a ghost, Thorne continued. 5 years hunting for evidence that would expose your employer's betrayal of 37 American servicemen. but you never understood what you were actually looking for. In the main living room, Judge Harrington stood exposed, hands visible at his sides. They weren't looking for evidence, he called out. They were looking for a witness, someone who could testify to what really happened in Syria. The mercenary leader emerged from the kitchen, weapon trained on Harrington. The judge volunteering as a hostage? How civic-minded. Not a hostage, Harrington replied calmly. A confession. Outside, Colonel Rhodes recognized his brother's intention with dawning horror. Cal, what are you doing? Sheriff Marietta restrained him from approaching the house. Wait, this isn't what you think. Inside, Judge Harrington faced the mercenary leader with the composed dignity that had marked his years on the bench. Operation Nightfall was compromised because I passed information to my brother about the mission parameters. Not intentionally to betray, but carelessly during a private dinner. Information that was intercepted and sold to hostile forces. The mercenary's expression remained professionally neutral. An interesting theory, Judge. Not a theory, Harrington continued. A confession I've been avoiding for 7 years. My brother's unit was ambushed because of my indiscretion. 37 men would have died if not for the operative you're hunting. Understanding dawned in the mercenary's eyes. You're the leak, the source we've been ordered to eliminate alongside Shadowhawk. I am, Harrington confirmed, and I've just confessed on a live feed being transmitted to federal oversight. Committees, military intelligence, and news organizations nationwide. The mercenaries' communications device erupted with urgent messages as their operational security collapsed. Outside, federal agents began moving in coordinated formation, no longer hindered by the need to protect civilians at all costs. The mercenary leader assessed the rapidly deteriorating tactical situation with professional detachment. An elegant trap, Judge, though I doubt you'll survive to see its conclusion. That's where you're wrong, Thorne's voice came from directly behind him. The mercenary hadn't heard him approach, a ghost materializing from shadows. He's under my protection now. At Cascade Lake, Commander Vanguard secured the boathouse perimeter, while Wren monitored communications through encrypted channels. The tactical situation at the Everett house had shifted dramatically with Judge Harrington's unexpected confession. Dad planned this, Wren realized. He knew the judge would break. Your father understands people, Vanguard replied, especially those carrying burdens of guilt. The judge has been living with his responsibility for his brother's near-death experience for 7 years. And Dad used that guilt to force a public confession that would expose the entire operation, Wren concluded, ending the hunt permanently rather than just escaping it again. Vanguard nodded with professional admiration. Shadowhawk's final mission. As dawn broke over Briarwood, the tactical situation resolved with surprising speed. Federal agents took custody of the surviving mercenaries, while evidence secured from their communications devices identified their employer, a defense contractor whose CEO had orchestrated the original betrayal of Colonel Rhodes's unit and the subsequent hunt for Shadowhawk. At the Everett home, Sheriff Marietta coordinated with federal authorities, while Thorne and Judge Harrington emerged unharmed. The judge looked simultaneously burdened and relieved, the weight of 7 years of secret guilt finally lifted through public confession. You knew? Harrington said quietly to Thorne. You knew it was me all along. Iris figured it out before she died, Thorne confirmed. The intelligence patterns, the information flow. She traced it back to a secured dinner reservation where you and your brother were photographed by foreign assets. And you've been living in my jurisdiction for 5 years, knowing I was responsible for the ambush that nearly killed Rhodes and his men, Harrington marveled, for the operation that cost your wife her life. The people who sold the information were responsible, Thorne corrected. You were careless, not malicious. There's a difference. Why didn't you expose me years ago? Because your brother survived, Thorne said simply. And because Wren needed stability after losing her mother. Revenge wouldn't have served either purpose. Colonel Rhodes approached, his expression complex as he regarded his brother. You should have told me, Cal. How could I? Harrington asked. Admit that my loose lips nearly got you killed, that Shadowhawk had to disobey direct orders to save you because of my carelessness? We're brothers, Rhodes said firmly. That matters more than mistakes. Days later, Thorne and Wren prepared to leave Briarwood, their cover blown, their safety potentially compromised despite the operational success. The town gathered at a respectful distance as they packed their modest belongings into nondescript vehicles, understanding now that something extraordinary had lived among them, unrecognized for 5 years. Judge Harrington approached, official papers in hand. "Your record in my court has been expunged," he said formally. "Not that it matters now." "It matters," Thorne contradicted. Briarwood was home. Harrington hesitated, then continued. "I'll be resigning next week. Some mistakes can't be undone with a gavel." "Second chances can be found in unexpected places," Thorne replied, thinking of the new identity documents Commander Vanguard had already prepared for him and Wren. Another town, another quiet existence, another opportunity to be ordinary. "Is that why you saved 37 strangers in Syria?" Harrington asked. "Because you believed in second chances?" Thorne considered this. "I saved them because someone should have saved my wife." They shook hands, a simple gesture bridging their divided worlds. Around them, the townspeople of Briarwood watched with new understanding of the quiet handyman who had lived among them, fixing furnaces, coaching youth basketball, and occasionally intervening when teenagers were bullied behind the hardware store. As they prepared to drive away, Wren asked the question that had been forming since the revelation in the courthouse. "Will we ever stop running, Dad?" Thorne considered this as he looked at the town receding behind them. "Your mother once told me that peace isn't found in a place. It's found in the truth of who you are." "And who are you now?" Wren asked. "Shadowhawk or Thorne Everett?" "For 5 years I've been your father," he answered. "That's the identity that matters most." For the first time since the chaos began, Wren smiled, a genuine expression that momentarily erased the tension of recent days. "Mom would have handled this whole situation more elegantly." "Without question," Thorne agreed, returning her smile. "She always said you had her strategic mind and my stubborn focus." "Where do we go now?" "Forward," Thorne replied. "For the first time in a long time, I'm not running from something. We're moving towards something." 6 months later, a new judge swore in Sheriff Marietta Colt, promoted after her handling of what local newspapers had termed the Briarwood incident. In the audience sat Deputy Archer, now wearing detective's insignia, having proven his capabilities during the operation. Beside him, surprisingly, was Colonel Rhodes, recently retired and relocated to Briarwood to help his brother adjust to civilian life after leaving the bench. After the ceremony, Rhodes approached the new judge, placing a challenge coin discreetly on the edge of the bench. "From a mutual friend," he explained. The coin bore no name, only the silhouette of a hawk. Miles away, in an undisclosed location, Thorne helped Wren with calculus homework in a new home. His satellite phone, silent for months, chimed once with an incoming message. "When you're ready. The world still needs Shadowhawk." Thorne glanced at Wren, now adapting to their new reality, stronger for knowing the truth of their past. He typed a response. "Shadowhawk was who I had to be. Thorne is who I choose to be." He paused, then added, "For now." The camera pulled back from their home, revealing it as one of many in a community of relocated operators and their families. Extraordinary people living ordinary lives by choice, their sacrifices known only to each other. In every town across America, heroes walk among us, disguised as ordinary people. The quiet neighbor who fixes your leaky faucet might have once saved lives in places you'll never hear about. The reserved parent at school functions might carry wisdom earned in circumstances you cannot imagine. Look around at the silent ones, those who never seek recognition or validation. They may be the very ones who deserve it most. If this story resonated with you, share in the comments about someone in your life whose quiet strength made a difference when it truly mattered. And subscribe to hear more stories that remind us how extraordinary people often hide in the most ordinary places, their greatest heroism being the choice to live simply among those they've sworn to protect.